All right, I'm in the Gospel of John, chapter 7. The Gospel of John, chapter 7. I'll be moving into verse 3 and probably make my way down to verse 7. And so to begin with, let me review a little bit of what I was describing in the previous message between verses 1 and 2, so you can see the flow, the connectivity of this conversation that's taking place between Jesus and his brothers. All right, beginning in verse 1, the Gospel of John, chapter 7, verse 1, it says, "After these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he did not want to walk in Judea, because the Jews sought to kill him." All right, now it was just a certain group of Jews. It wasn't all the Jews, of course. And in Galilee, there were a lot of Jews, as was described in chapter 6. There were a lot of Jews who wanted him to be the Messianic king. And then there were a lot of Jews in Judea who wanted him dead and who did not want him to be the Messianic king. In the previous chapter, in chapter 6, I explained how Jesus, he did not allow the people, the Jews in Galilee, he did not allow them to seize him and make him king by force. There was a way that he would be willing to be established as the king of Israel, but the criteria that he established was not being met. Mainly that the religious leadership needed to acknowledge him as their king. All right, and so in Galilee, he turned the people off. In Galilee, he got them to walk away since him trying to walk away didn't work. So he got them to walk away. And really all he had to do was explain to them that he was not going to feed them. He's not going to just produce by miracles, for all time, an abundance of food for them to eat. That's not the kind of relationship that he's willing to have with them. And so eventually they departed, and it was just because, of course, their interest in him was that they wanted the food, the physical food that would feed their flesh. They were not interested in having a personal interactive relationship with Jesus as a person. They were not interested in surrendering to the new covenant. And so he did not want to have a relationship with those people who were not willing to have the kind of relationship that he wanted to have with them. And what he felt and what he thought about the kind of relationship that he wants to have with people, what he thinks is important, and it still is the case to this day. There are many people who approach God from the perspective of, you exist, God exists, you exist for the purpose of giving me the things that I need, especially those things that I'm having trouble acquiring for myself. And if you don't supply the needs that I declare you exist to supply, then I will ignore you. I will not believe in you. That's how a lot of people will relate to him today. And of course, in general, he doesn't respond because that's not the kind of relationship that he is interested in having with other people and what he thinks does matter. All right, so that's chapter 6 and into chapter 7, why he was able to continue to walk about in Galilee. In verse 2, now the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles was at hand, and I explained in the previous message that it was necessary for Jesus to attend, otherwise he would have violated the Mosaic law. The Mosaic law was very clear that he was required to be physically present there in Jerusalem. And so if he did not go during the appointed time, then he would be guilty of violating the Mosaic law. The people could accuse him of committing sin. It would be legitimate, all right, and therefore he would not qualify as the person who Jesus was presenting himself to be, that he was effectively without sin. All right, in verse 3, therefore his brothers said to him, "Depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing." All right, so his brothers know. These are his brothers. He's the oldest in a family with some brothers, and they tell him, knowing full well that there are a lot of people there who are wanting to kill him, and they're waiting for his arrival so that they can perhaps stir up a little bit of a mob and have him murdered. They know this. So they're encouraging him to go, right? So it's a way of saying, hey, Jesus, why don't you go to the festival so you can go get yourself killed? All right? And this is the kind of relationship at this time that Jesus had with his brothers. This is how they felt about him. This is how they related to him. All right? That they would actually, be okay with putting him in harm's way, right? Or encouraging him to be in harm's way, that this is how they feel about Jesus. All right, depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing. Verse 4, for no one does anything in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world, for even his brothers did not believe in him. His brothers did not believe in him. They were saying, depart from here and go into Judea, not because they believed in him, not because they recognized that he was the Messiah, but because they thought, hey, why don't you go get yourself killed? That was their attitude. So that your disciples may also see the works that you are doing. Well, there were a lot of disciples. There were a lot of people who believed in Jesus, even though many of them departed when he had some serious things to say in chapter 6, but there were still a lot. And they already knew about, at least probably, most of the miracles that he has performed. So there would not be a necessity, there would be no need for him to do any more. All right? This is part of the disconnect between his brothers, and the truth is that his disciples already knew about the miracles that he had done. They don't need to see any more if they're going to use the miracles as a qualification or as a way of Jesus asserting that God is with him and that what he is testifying of is probably something that you should pay attention to. He's already done enough. He's already done plenty of them. So he has disciples already. There's no need to, apparently, there would be no need for him to continue to provide more and more and more and more. But his brothers are effectively telling Jesus, you need to provide your disciples with some more miracles. You need to do some more. You need to keep doing it. Otherwise, there is the risk that they might stop believing in you. They might stop doing that. And I can understand why the Lord would say that if that's the case, that could be acceptable, because he wants the people to believe in the living God, in the one who Jesus represents. He wants people to believe in him because it's the truth. Right? Because it's the truth, not just because there's signs and wonders and miracles, but because there is truth to be believed in. All right, let me look at some of these other phrases that are here with a little bit more detail. Depart from here and go into Judea. This is verse 3, that your disciples may see the works that you are doing. All right, well, his disciples already know about works. They don't necessarily need to see any more, especially if they're going to be moved into the direction of the kind of relationship that Jesus genuinely wants to have with his disciples. In verse 4, for no one does anything in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. All right? Nobody does things in secret when they seek to be known openly. Okay? Well, what they're doing is they are making an accusation against Jesus. They're saying, you are a person who seeks to be known openly. All right? Well, to an extent, he was. He was doing things so that he may be known openly. Therefore, he would not be doing that many things in secret in this way. But only to a certain extent, not necessarily to the magnitude that they are assuming that he wants to be known, or that they want to accuse him of wanting to be known. There were many things that Jesus did in secret. Many things. There were many miracles that Jesus did so that he could be known openly in order to assert and defend his messianic claim. But he only did that officially for the first part of his ministry. And then when the people officially rejected him as the Messiah, and this occurred with the healing of the man who was blind, deaf, and mute, and he had demons that were present within him, and Jesus cast out the demons from the man who was blind and mute. When he performed that miracle, which is not described in the Gospel of John, but is described in the other Gospels, that was when there was an official, recognized rejection of him as the Messiah by the religious leaders. And it was at that time when he himself said, I'm not going to provide you with any more signs except one, and that will be the sign of Jonah. For just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so I will also be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. All of the signs and miracles and wonders that he did after that point were for the purpose of meeting the personal needs of individuals. And so, in a sense, they were done secretly, not openly, as he did before, because of the official rejection. All right? And so, to an extent, yes, there were times and there were places when Jesus did these things so that he may be known openly. But not always. And in fact, towards the second part of his ministry, if we make a division between the time before that healing and the time after, the time before he was seeking to be known openly, and afterwards he was doing things, but he was doing them secretly and only for the purpose of meeting personal needs, not for the purpose of asserting his claim as the Messiah. This is very important. All right, and so he is doing things. He is actively doing things during this part of his ministry. He was, so that he could meet the personal needs of individuals, and he was not just seeking to be known openly. That was not his purpose. All right, verse 4, for no one does anything in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world, for even his brothers did not believe in him. Well, he already showed himself to the world. To his satisfaction, he did enough. He did enough that the world, present, the present geography, they had enough information, there was enough news to know that there was a person, Jesus, present. He was present in the geography, and that he did these things, and that these things are enough, they are enough to assert his messianic claim. So if anyone in the world, right, in the recognized geography there, if anyone wanted to know him, they could seek him out. Many did. They could seek him out. They could investigate more. They could have a part in the discovery of Jesus for themselves. He had done enough. All right? He had done more than enough. And so if you do these things, show yourself to the world. Well, he had shown himself to the world. Now, even if he does show himself to people in this way, that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically believe in him as the Messiah or as the living God manifested in the flesh or as the King of Israel. They're not going to necessarily believe in him, even if he does these things openly to the world. His brothers are a good example. All right? If what they say to Jesus is true to the extent of the encouragement that they are persuading him with, if that would be valid, if that would be true, then they should believe in him. But they don't. Okay? Now, I know this might sound a little bit awkward to a lot of people who have had some significant experience in the Christian world. This might sound a little awkward because you probably have been told in various creative ways, you probably have been told that the more you're like Jesus, the more that people will believe in God. You've probably been told that. You know, that it could be that if you reduce the sin in your life, then others will be so impressed by your holiness that they will submit and believe the gospel. You've probably heard that. If you haven't heard that, you need to get out a little bit more often. You might have been practicing too much social distancing. Okay? But this is a big message conveyed directly or indirectly. All right? There are ways of saying that to people, of communicating that to people without just outright saying it. You know, I mean, you could do a 30-minute sermon, and for the first 25 minutes, you could be told ever so subtly that it's up to you. You know, it's up to you. You have to remove the sin out of your life. You have to be more like Jesus. And if you are, then you will be the person in the lives of the other people, your family members, your relatives, your co-workers, people in your life. You will influence them in such a way they will be so impressed that they will want to be Christians too. And then in the next 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes, they'll tell you that you're a dirty, rotten, evil, wicked sinner and that you need to get your flesh under control, and this is why. And you may not pick up on the message right away. It could be like Tuesday or Thursday before you start to adjust your life and start living that way and feeling the pressure that you're under. That it really does depend on you. In effect, what this means is that you are responsible for the salvation of those around you. You are responsible. It's all on you and how good of a Christian you are. This is the message that gets conveyed. All right. Another way that some people can identify with this is that when you're first considering the faith, then the religious people will express to you that your blood is on your own hands. You know, if you don't believe, then you're going to be condemned, and it's all on you. And there's a lot of truth to that. But what they say afterwards, the first week is that Jesus will take you, right where you are. God loves you. You can have the security of salvation. You can be made into a new person. You need to recognize that you are responsible for your own sins, and you need to obtain forgiveness, and we're going to give you the procedure and the altar and the environment and all of that and the assistance to get you to that point. And then you come back the next week and they tell you, now everyone else's blood is on your hands. Okay, so the week before, only your blood was on your hands. And now everyone else's blood is on your hands. Those who don't believe, especially those people who you are close to, probably because you are still a little too sinful. You're not such a good Christian. And they might point some of these things out to you too. They might say, well, You're not so impressive, so you can't tell me about my sin. You got plenty of your own. You go fix your own and then come back and tell me some of these things. But even if you do, it still won't help. It won't help. All right? But this is the message that people are hearing and giving and trying to live by, that the more you're like Jesus, the more other people will turn to God. Now listen, there may be some examples. There may very well be some examples where this is effective, where this is a good start. I don't want to, say that this cannot be, because I'm confident, even though I cannot think of any off the top of my head right now. I suppose if I was to really think about it, go into the deepest part of my memories and meditate on these things, I might be able to find an example or two. I just can't think of one right now. And maybe you know of some examples. And so I'm not saying that there is the absence of existence. All right? I'm just trying to express to you that this requirement that people assume for themselves is not necessarily going to work out, and that predominantly it doesn't. And here is a very good example of this. Jesus himself lived in this household. He was the oldest of all these kids, all right? Very much a part of the family. And they did not believe in him, right? He was there. You would think that if Jesus was present in your home with your family, that it would only be a matter of time, maybe a day or two is what I mean, before everyone would repent and believe the gospel. All right, maybe a week, maybe a year. But no, his brothers who he grew up with, who he participated in raising as well as it would be expected of the oldest in general, that happens a lot, they didn't believe in him. They just didn't. Okay? And so the more that people pursue trying to be like Jesus with the expectation that this is going to influence other people, while there may be some examples when this does happen, in general, it does not happen. All right? Jesus himself is a wonderful example of how this just didn't happen. Okay? In verse 5, he says, for even his brothers did not believe in him. Okay, so that's how his brothers are relating to Jesus. Let's take a moment and look at his response. In verse 6, then Jesus said to them, my time has not yet come. All right, and then he goes on and talks about their time. But let's start with his. My time has not yet come. All right, now there are several messages that can be conveyed with this response that he gives them. Several messages that can be conveyed. First and foremost, let's start with the message that his time has not yet come to go and attend the Feast of Tabernacles. All right, he's saying the time has not yet come for him to go, to travel, to be there on time. All right, it's not yet come for him to do that. And so he will do that. He's just saying it's just not the right time for me to go yet. That's one way to look at this. Another way to look at this, which I prefer to look at because I think it's a little bit more of his intention to say this, that is that his time has not yet come to be put to death. That time has not yet come. All right, so his brothers would say, hey, why don't you go to Jerusalem and go get yourself killed? And he's saying, yeah, I'll do that, but not yet. Okay, he's going to do that later. He'll go to Jerusalem later, where the Jews are seeking to kill him so he can get himself killed. He'll do that later. All right, so his time has not yet come, but it's coming. It just isn't quite here yet. And I really believe that is his subtlety of his response to their subtlety, of their sarcasm, of trying to trying to manipulate him and or inspire him to go to Jerusalem to get himself killed. But he says, but your time is always ready. Okay, so if we just consider these two messages, your time is always ready in the sense that you can go to that festival anytime you want. You know, your time is always ready. You go right ahead. It's all on you, all right? It's your responsibility. And so you can go ahead and go anytime you want. You have the authority to do this. Okay, and in addition to that, he could also be saying, and your time is always ready for you to die also. All right, now this is a subtle proclamation of something that is going to be revealed later. And that's the idea of when we believe the gospel, when we surrender to the new covenant, there is a type of death that occurs. There's a type of death. When you are made into a new creation, who you were once before, in a certain abstract way, from a certain perspective, who you were once before dies. All right? You are no longer the same person. You are now a resurrected person. From God's point of view, you are a new creation entirely. Who you once were is not who you are now. Now you are a person who is indwelt by the Holy Spirit of God. So there is a death that occurs when you become alive in Christ Jesus. You are dead to the world. Before you're saved, you are dead to God and very much alive to the world. So your time is always ready. It's always ready to die to the world, to go and get yourself killed, all right, in this abstract way. Your time is always ready to go get yourself killed. Okay? And believe the gospel and be made spiritually alive. That's a big message. All right, there are other ways that we can apply this concept in order to convey the reality of what it means to have a relationship with the Lord. Another way to understand this is to say that you are dead to the old covenant. You are dead to the law, and you are alive to the new covenant. You are alive to the inheritance in Christ Jesus. That's another way to look at that the law has no authority over you because you are dead to it. Right? You're dead to the law, and you are alive in Christ Jesus. So when he proclaims to his brothers, hey, your time is always ready. Not only is he directly saying to them, look, your time, you can go to Jerusalem and go to this festival anytime you like. But indirectly, he is also expressing to them that their time is always ready where they can go get themselves killed by believing in him as the Messiah and by believing in the gospel. That in my opinion, is something that he is indirectly conveying to them. But the reason why they don't believe is because it is a matter of belief. All right? It is a matter of what is true and what is not true. That's what it's about. It really is important. What is true and what is not true, which is why he continues into verse 7. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it that its works are evil. All right? It cannot hate you because you do not tell people the truth about their condition, about themselves. You relate to people in a way that you allow them to perpetuate a lie, and they will like you because you will assist them you will be a part of contributing to their false reality. All right? Now listen, for there to be relationships between people, there will be the necessity to allow for some of that. You're just going to have to allow for some of that. If you encounter a new person, and you decide that you want to have a relationship with them, and they also decide that they want to have a relationship with you, you have a mutual decision to engage and relate to one another. If you point out every single sin that they've got, if you feel that that's your role in their lives, it won't be long before they decide that they don't want you to be a part of their life. Okay, it won't take long at all. It will happen. And so you will have to allow for some tolerance, okay, to an extent, in order to maintain, yes, a false reality. However, that allows you to have access to this person so that perhaps a little bit at a time, as they are willing and able to receive it, as they can withstand a little bit of correction, a little bit of an adjustment, a little bit of a challenge to the things that they believe, so that maybe they can embrace a little bit when they feel safe, when they feel comfortable, when they feel like they can make the adjustments that would be that would result, that would be all the side effects resulting from embracing a different belief than what they hold to. When it comes to the emotional issues of a person and the desires for love and acceptance, for the deepest needs that a person has, to make an adjustment in belief can have profound consequences. And so to do so a little bit at a time, as a person can withstand it, is important. All right, it is important. Now, Jesus was being very aggressive with this. If we were to use an example, it would be the difference between a spray bottle and a fire hose. Okay, that maybe just sprinkle a little bit of truth onto somebody with a spray bottle, just a little bit at a time. Yeah, it's going to be annoying, but maybe it will be inspirational. Maybe they'll see the value of it, the truth of it. They'll make adjustments after a while, or just hose them down with an abundance of condemnation, and then maybe they'll change. No, they won't. They'll just hate you. All right, that's all you're going to get. That's a way of understanding what Jesus is telling his brothers when he says, "The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it, that its works are evil." And Jesus needed to do that. That was what he was doing at that time. That was his purpose at that time. He was there as a representative of the living God to tell people that God just simply isn't impressed. They thought they found a way to live in complete obedience to the law. They believed that they had finally achieved success, that they had done it. And so God himself had to show up personally as a man to speak to them and to communicate with them and tell them, look, I'm not impressed. And what I think matters. It's just not, that's not satisfactory from God's point of view. So that was his ministry at that time. That was his purpose. All right, the world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it that its works are evil. Moving forward into verse 8, you go up to this feast. I am not yet going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come. All right, so he does give them the hint that he's going to go. He's just not going to go right now. In verse 9, when he had said these things to them, he remained in Galilee. All right, and let me move forward a little bit to verse 10. But when his brothers had gone up, then he also went up to the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret. All right, he did go, but not openly. He went in secret. But this is contrary to what was said in verse 3. His brothers therefore said to him, depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing. Verse 4, for no one does anything in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. But then in verse 10, he also went up to the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret. So of course he did the exact opposite of what his brothers were encouraging him to do. He went, but he went secretly. He did not go openly. He's not doing these things openly. Why? Because he himself does not want to be known for himself, like they were accusing him of. They're saying, this is just all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you just wanting to be popular, about you wanting to be known. That's what all of this is about. And he effectively said no. All right? He said no. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to sound a little bit awkward, and so let me say something else just before I do. Quite often, people will use a phrase, the phrase of, it's all about Jesus. And there are many ways that I can say that with conviction, with absolute truth. Yes, it is all about Jesus. Absolutely. But from another abstract point of view, in this case, it could be said it's not all about Jesus. Only from a certain point of view. Okay, from other points of view, sure, absolutely. But not in all points of view. In this example, it would not be appropriate to say that it's all about Jesus. Because his brothers accuse him by saying, it's all about you. And then he does the exact opposite. He goes secretly and not openly, and he doesn't do his things openly because it's not really about him. All right? So from a certain perspective, in this case, it's not. And let me explain to you why. The reason why is because this was a small part of the fullness of God. Jesus was not the fullness of the living God to the extent that people could not withstand his presence. All right? When Moses was communicating with the living God, Moses says, I want to see your face. God says, no, if you do, you're going to die. All right? That's an example of the fullness of the living God to the extent where you would not be able to withstand him. In this case, God manifested in the flesh as a man, as Jesus, and he did so in a way that even his brothers could grow up with him and not see him for who he is. Okay, in that sense, Jesus was not an expression. In that sense, he was not an expression of the fullness of the living God. And so we have our God who has manifested himself in a way that he is going to be a witness of the fullness of himself. That he's going to go secretly into the world to testify of himself, to be a witness of himself. And that's what Jesus was doing. He was encouraging people to believe in the living God, as he would often describe him as the Father. And he would pray to the Father. He would speak about the Father. That was an abstraction to increase the amount of the fullness of God, to increase such so that people would believe more in the fullness of the living God, as opposed to just the manifestation of himself as Jesus. Look, you do this too, all right? You do this in your own life as well. You would probably acknowledge that there are a lot of people in your life, okay? There are a lot of people in your life, and probably most of the people in your life don't really know you. You'd probably admit that and agree with that. They don't really know you. I mean, they kind of know about you. You know, they know a little bit about you. They know about maybe one or two of your interests. But they don't really, if someone was to ask you the question Does this person really know you as a person? You would say, no. Okay, so that's an example where God has done the same thing, where he has expressed himself in small ways. He is interacting with people who can know him a little bit, but they don't know the fullness of himself. In this way, Jesus was a testimony. He testified of the living God. He was there for that purpose. He was not there to draw attention to himself. He was there to draw attention to the living God. And he performed these miracles so that he could testify of the living God, of the fullness of the living God, so that people would believe in him. So this is why he went secretly, and why he would do so in a way that would be the exact opposite, in order to emphasize the point that this is not just all about him. It is about more than that. It is about him in the fullness of who he is. All right, I can give you another example. You may have observed a lot of the teachings that I have done on video. You may have watched them all up to date. You may have listened to every audio file that I've got multiple times. And you may very well learn a lot about me by doing that and by paying attention. But you still don't know much about me at all as a person. You have to encounter me and relate to me outside of the boundaries of this kind of structure that is present while I'm trying to accomplish the purpose of contributing to the creation of life, all right, which is what I fundamentally do. That's what I do. I contribute to the creation of life by proclaiming the truth of God, testifying of him, and helping people to get past a lot of the barriers that religion places in their way. And I tell people about the character and the person of God so that they might know him a little bit more and be encouraged to pursue a personal relational experience with him. But that doesn't mean that you know me in the fullness of who I genuinely am. All right? It just means you know a part of me. What I do in the ministry in this sense is not all about me. It's not all about me in the sense that I don't do it for my own promotion. It's not all about me in the sense that it's all of who I am. Okay, in those ways you can understand what I mean. So when I say that it's not all about Jesus, in order to understand John chapter 7 verses 4 and verse 10, John chapter 7 verse 4 and verse 10, to see how these two are put together, to see this, I think you can appreciate that when God manifested in the flesh as Jesus, he was genuinely living as a man, not as God. He really was. Okay. So that's what I've got for these passages in here between verse 1 and mainly verse 7. I will continue with this more in the next message. Let me go ahead and pause here. I do have a question for those of you who are using this for some small groups that I think would be worth asking. In what ways do you need to keep your beliefs secret to sustain relationships with others? All right? In what ways do you need to keep your beliefs secret and not tell others about your faith? You know, in order to maintain and continue the relationships that you have with other people. And folks, there is a place for this. There is. And it's not being deceptive or dishonest. In fact, you can tell people, look, yeah, I do have some other convictions about things. I'm just not talking about them right now. There's a person who I have in my life, for example, who absolutely despises my beliefs completely. This person is just like that. In fact, it was a couple of years ago where I was very direct with this person. And I told them, I said, listen, I think I've had enough. I've had enough about talking about this particular topic about what I believe and my religious convictions and in my life's work and stuff like that. And so I just want you to know that with you, I'm perfectly fine in listening to whatever it is you like to share with me, but I'm not going to talk with you. I'm not going to tell you about the work that I do. I'm not going to tell you about the things that are important to me. I'm not going to tell you about the things that I genuinely believe. I'm just not going to talk with you about that anymore. I'm not going to answer any questions you have about that anymore. I'm not going to be dragged into or drawn into a conversation about this anymore. If I sense that this is something that you want me to engage with you, I'm going to cut it off. I'm just not going to do this with you anymore. Okay? That's one person. There are others that I certainly do not need to relate to that extent. Where I do have some freedom and some liberty to relate to them. When you think about what I just described, all right, you may wonder, well then, Aaron, what kind of a relationship do you have with this person at all? When what I've just described is really is who I really am. That I'm telling this person, I'm not going to share with you who I really am anymore. So if you're going to be in my life, it's just going to be about who you are. So I effectively related to this person that they were interacting with me and they were in my life and they really didn't want to know me. They don't want to know me. They just don't. So now it's out in the open. Now it's obvious, okay? It just is. That they don't want to know me. They don't. They want to be around me. There are other things that they are benefiting from because I exist. But they don't want to know me, and they don't want to have a relationship with me as a person. Not at all. They are interested in me for my utility, and because they have access to others through me, stuff like that. And as long as I have an understanding that this is the way the relationship is, I can work with it. I can navigate it. I can be okay with it and just understand that this is just the way it is with this person. That doesn't mean that I have to spend too much time with this person. Okay? It doesn't mean that. In fact, I can use that as justification to maybe not speak to this person for more than 5 minutes every 2 or 3 months. Perfectly fine. But I'm saying that there will be an extent of that. So this could be a good opportunity to have a conversation with others as you're in your small group, and you can talk with each other about, I have these people in my life, and these are some limits. These are some limits that I have when talking with them. And if I go outside of these limits, outside of these boundaries, then the relationship will end because your beliefs, all right, your beliefs will make them too uncomfortable. Your exposure of the truth will be more than what they can process, than what they can handle. If they are confronted with this truth that you have, and they try to incorporate it into their life, then there will be a lot of consequences. And the consequences can just be more than what they can bear, at least at this time. Okay? And so you will drive them